Well, hello again from here at Whitley Park, from the shelter of my bus stop / dugout. Yeah, it's freezing here today. Sadly, I've left the wet banded gloves at home and I've definitely underclubbed with the gilet. But on we go, and it was pretty hot inside with Eddie Howe in his press conference, and it wasn't really until the end that it came to the boil. Now, with Eddie, he doesn't waste a word. I've always said this. He's incredibly erudite. When we come back to transcribe what he said to us, he speaks in full sentences, perfect English, the grammar, it's quite incredible really. But as well, he listens to questions and he's always got a message. He pays respect to every inquiry that comes his way and he gets across what he wants. And this is the point I make. It wasn't until the very last question that he, for me, sent the message that he wants to give to others at the club, those back in the dressing room, and to us guys as journalists as well. Now, normally with the last question of a press conference, you might be winding down or just playing out for time to get out of there. Not Eddie Howe. And the question to him was about Alexander Isak and keeping him at the football club. And there we will come to that, because a lot of my information and my take around the whole situation with Isak, I've been pretty consistent on this for a long time now, isn't necessarily what you guys want to hear, but we've got to face the truth of it. It's a nuanced subject, so we'll come back to that. But what Eddie Howe said was, we haven't signed a player now for several windows, for 3 windows, a first team player. Yes, we want to keep Alexander Isak, absolutely, and if you want to be successful in the short term and the long term, Eddie's words this, he said, you've got to keep Isak and others, but at the same time, you've got to add to the group. He said it's been too long now, and that was a strong, important message. Now, you may think it's stating the obvious, but for the manager to feel the need just to remind everybody of it and to make that public, I think it's really important and significant. It's what I'm going to write about for Mail Sport today. And the reason I say that is this season, and this club is on a little bit of a knife edge. Let's look at the season first of all in the short term. They're now, as I tweeted last weekend, the only club in England still capable of winning the domestic treble. They're probably not going to win the Premier League, but they still, in theory, can. And they're left in both domestic cup competitions. Never before in Newcastle's history have they been in both domestic cup competitions at this stage going into late February. So you look at this season and think, wow, couldn't it be something special when it comes to fitness? They look in good shape, those top players. Anthony Gordon, Isak, Tonali, Bruno, all of those are fit and in form right now. You look at that scenario, the fact they've got those players in the first place, they've got this chance for silverware to qualify for the Champions League. Wow, this season really could be something special. They've got a wonderful opportunity there in front of them. Beyond that, extrapolate that over the longer term. Well, if they do qualify for the Champions League, and that then in turn keeps the players I've mentioned at the club, and they're able to add to it and signal that intent and that ambition to those stars already in the dressing room, because they do need that. It was the unsettling factor last summer when Eddie Howe speaks about players in his dressing room being unsettled. That is what he's speaking to, the stagnation on the training ground, on the stadium, on signings coming in. If they can then add to that in the summer, then opportunity, being on the cusp of something special. And it's a knife edge. It's a knife edge this season, and it's a knife edge beyond that. And I think that's the point Eddie wanted to make. It's all very well talking about Alexander Isak today, as we did, being as good, if not better, than Erling Haaland, and the want and the need to keep him at the club. It's all very well exploring Sandro Tonali and the influence he's had and going into that central midfield and just being an absolute game changer for Newcastle's season. Wow, if Manchester City had Sandro Tonali, given the problems they've had in the middle of midfield and the loss of Rodri, it's all very well saying that and celebrating that. But what Eddie is saying is it's taken them so far. The club, longer term, need to support him. They need to be looking now to what they're going to do in the summer to build on this, because while the manager and those around him and recruitment wise, they've worked so hard to get to this place where you think a lot of those building blocks are in place, well, they might just come crashing down if they don't act on it and they don't build on this position of strength. We've already spoken about that with regards to what happened or rather what didn't happen in January. That's gone. It's just interesting that the manager already has one eye on the summer. For now, absolutely, Newcastle might not have this opportunity 12 months down the line with regards this season. When you look at it, the top 5, 2 traditional rivals, Manchester United and Tottenham, well, they're non-runners. The fact there are going to be 5 spaces in the Champions League because of the coefficient, coupled with the opportunities in the Cups. Carabao Cup speaks for itself. They're only 1 game away from beating Liverpool. And beyond that, in the FA Cup, you looked at that draw last weekend and you thought, this really has potentially opened up. They then get Brighton at home to be one very winnable match away, you would think, from a quarter-final, and then only one game away from another trip to Wembley. Goodness, what would the ticket scramble be like for that one? So that's why I say they really are on the cusp of something incredible, brilliant this season. That knife edge, it just depends which way it's going to fall. And the manager knows that, and that's why, for me, he felt the need to send that reminder today. You can only take them so hard for so long, and he and the players together have done a quite incredible job. There comes a point when they do need that help, and you would hope, given the non-investment of the last 3 windows in the first team squad, that they really are in a position to do that in the summer. I, as a journalist, I've made those inquiries already. What is there going to be to spend? Give us a number. It would be great to have that in my Newcastle confidential column. So far, that sort of information hasn't come back. I think in large part, it depends what then happens in June. So all still to be determined, but Eddie Howe clearly expects, wants, and for me, deserves that promise and that commitment to a level of first team investment come the summer. Now, what does the future hold for Alexander Isak? Now, I know sometimes you guys don't like this being a topic of discussion, but it's there, it exists, because Alexander Isak is the best striker in the world. You can't have it both ways. You can't talk about having this player who is the absolute envy of every big club and then not expect for his future and admiring eyes to be brought into the conversation. Now, where are we with that? Well, it hasn't really changed since the last time I spoke in depth about this, but it's coming to focus again this week because it's Manchester City versus Newcastle, Alexander Isak versus Erling Haaland, and all the narrative that surrounds that. But Isak's future is dependent on what happens between now and the end of the season. If they are in the Champions League, then that perhaps enables them to give him that pay rise that he wants and perhaps deserves as well. So that is why what happens over the next few months is so important to the longer term future and the longer term health of Newcastle. I come back to that phrase, they've got that incredible opportunity in front and they've got to go and take it now. Now, if Isak does want that contract improvement, that pay rise, then they need to be in the Champions League to achieve that. So until we know that, until we know what happens with Newcastle beyond this season, until we know what they intend to do in the summer, and that's then communicated back to those players who want to see others of their level of ability arrive, then it is all still to be determined. And while it is to be determined, you've just got to put up with the noise around Alexander Isak and where he may or may not be playing his football next season. Now, my question to Eddie Howe this morning was, who would you rather have, Alexander Isak or Erling Haaland? A little bit of a naughty, direct question. Of course, Eddie dealt with it diplomatically and skillfully. He did say he wouldn't swap Alexander Isak for anybody. Perhaps that was his way of saying, well, yeah, in answer to your question, it is Alexander Isak. And I would go along with that too. Now, if you'd asked me this question a year ago, I dare say you guys as well, if you're applying objective analysis to it, you would probably say Erling Haaland is ahead of Alexander Isak. I no longer think that a year on. Isak's game has improved, and this is what I come back to this point. People say Newcastle have done well with recruitment. They've signed Alexander Isak. Wow, what a find he was. What a find Botman was. Kamara's was. Well, those players have been good signings, brilliant signings, but there might have been bad signings for a different manager. They've improved since they come into this club. Don't forget, when Alexander Isak signed 2 or 3 seasons ago, I lose track of time now, but that first season, he was either injured for large parts of it or wasn't necessarily in the best form. He certainly wasn't the player we see now. Don't forget, for the Carabao Cup final 2 years ago, he was on the bench. He started the game on the bench, and at the time, we weren't massively grumbling about that. It wasn't a massive controversy or an outrage, really. You think, looking back now, wow, why was Alexander Isak on the bench in a cup final? Well, he's a different player, and yes, a lot of that is down to himself and that improvement and that potential being realised and unlocked in his own hard work. But don't underestimate the effect on players, those coaches and that backroom team, and Eddie Howe has. They improve individuals to do that. The evidence is there from every player they've inherited to every player they've brought in almost. The strike rate for improvement is astonishing, really. And I think Alexander Isak, this comes back to me answering the question I asked of Eddie, I think he's a better player than he was 2 years ago. I think he's a better player than he was 1 year ago. He's added so much more to his game now. The goals Erling Haaland scores for Manchester City, those ones where anything comes to him in the box and he mops up. He's a great scorer of goals, Erling Haaland, but not necessarily a scorer of great goals. A lot of them are improvised finishes, in that penalty box to me. And when he's lethal, absolutely lethal. Alexander Isak was more the opposite before that. Every goal he scored was a drop in his shoulder, a top corner, a dribble, a wonderful goal. He's changed now. He's added that penalty box poacher's instinct to put those ones into the back of the net from 3 yards at the Leazer's end when Jacob Murphy invariably rolls it on a plate for him. So he has added to his game, and that's what Eddie Howe spoke about in there. Allied to all those qualities, we already knew that he had that ability to go out to the left. Haaland wouldn't play on the left wing, get a ball on that domain, drop a shoulder, come in and beat 3 men and put one in the top corner. Alexander Isak can. That is what he's got. That is why, for me, he is unique and better, not just than Erling Haaland, than everybody else. They really are sat on, and I've said this 5-6 weeks ago, I've been consistent with this. They really have, for me, got the best striker in world football right now. And all of these questions about keeping him at the club, and Eddie was asked again, and of course he said, you've got to, if you want to progress, you've got to keep these players. Well, that is why games down at Manchester City tomorrow, and going there and winning, we didn't think they could go to Manchester United, Tottenham and Arsenal in the space of a week and win those 3. Going to Manchester City, that seems like an even bigger ask, given historically they never win there. But they've got to go and start doing that sort of thing now, and they are capable and able of doing that, especially when they've got better players in certain positions than Manchester City. They've got Sandro Tonali, they've got Bruno Guimaraes. Newcastle's midfield is better than Manchester City's midfield. Even right through the middle, would you have thought you would be saying this? They've got a better striker than Manchester City. So go there and win. That is what they've got to do, to send that message to those in the dressing room that they are capable now of competing on that level. But more so than that, just to get those points on the board, to put themselves back in that top 4, to stay close to those teams at the very top there. Arsenal, Liverpool, City, Nottingham Forest. It's going to be so crucial what happens from the league. Yes, we're talking about the cups, there's all the excitement there, but that league, don't lose sight of the Champions League and how important and significant that is going to be. Now, on team news for the game down at City, I broke the story earlier in the week at Mail Sport that there was good news on the fitness front. The scans for Sven Botman and Dan Burn, they return good news, not serious injuries. Anthony Gordon, he too missed the game down at Birmingham with a thigh problem. He doesn't have a serious injury. He's trained this week. He'll be fine for tomorrow down at City. Dan Burn, well, when he came off at Birmingham, it looked awful, looked like a groin injury that could put his participation in the cup final in doubt. The scan is good. It's not serious. He's even got a chance of featuring at City tomorrow. Sven Botman less so. Now, a week ago, I wrote that Botman was okay, that he would miss the Birmingham game, would probably return at City. But what Eddie's just said to us this morning, there's lingering pain there, and he probably won't be risked down at the Etihad. But beyond that, for Forest, in 9 days' time now, there's every chance that he will return. Prediction-wise, I think they won't get beat. That's what I'll commit to. I think they'll go there tomorrow and find a way to extract a result. I'm going to err on the side of caution to a degree. I wouldn't be overly confident about them going there and winning, given City. I think they actually have recruited well in January. The guy Moamush who's come in is a very good player. They might just have a little bit of renewed energy in that regard, and traditionally isn't a great place for Newcastle to go. But I think they'll go there and they'll get a result. So I'm going to go for an entertaining 2-2 draw. Well, okay, guys, I'll be down at the Etihad tomorrow. If you see me out about on the trains, please do come and have a chat and a debate. The trains are longer tomorrow, so we've got plenty of time to chew all things Newcastle United. My Newcastle Confidential column, I'll put the link in the description below to that. The story this week, a really nuanced subject, the anger and the backlash from corporate box holders only being given 4 tickets rather than the 10 that expected for the Wembley allocation. Now, again, probably needs a whole other video on this, but what I will say is that you see the word corporate and there's a certain association and a lack of sympathy to a degree with that, but not all boxes are the same, and some of the guys I spoke to this week who feel a little bit let down by only getting the 4 rather than the 10 that expected. Well, for them, they pay the money, they put the money down, and it's just 10 season tickets, It's not a case of one guy at the head of a business and they've got 9 different clients from all over the place in there every week. It's used for, some boxes are used for family, friends, grandchildren, all the rest of it. So there is, no 2 boxes are the same. And I think that's where this has evoked a lot of emotion among those who do just see the box as an extension of what used to be the season tickets in the stand. So Newcastle Confidential below, loads of stories from inside the club in there. So yeah, guys, I'll see you again in 24 hours time, reflecting on what I think will be a non-defeat for Newcastle at Manchester City. It's not often we've said that. Okay, take care, goodbye.